Okay, so the final topic within democracy and participation, which hopefully takes about 2 weeks to do, is on pressure groups. Pressure groups are often actually called interest groups in America. So if you see interest groups, it's the same as pressure groups. The exam might call them interest groups potentially. They are the same thing. So all this PowerPoint is going to do is a very quick kind of introduction to pressure groups in the United States. Okay, just give you a bit of a brief overview on what we'll be looking at. So, I think the first thing you need to understand about pressure groups in America is that there's not just the National Rifle Association. Lots of students' essays, all they ever talk about is the NRA. You need to have a much greater variety of pressure groups to use as examples within your essays. Otherwise, it runs the risk of just being a National Rifle Association essay. The other thing that you need to do, sometimes when you read students' essays on pressure groups, you think to yourself, is this a UK or a US answer? So again, you need to make sure you link it into the American political system and the American political culture and institutions when you're doing your essays on pressure groups in the exam or outside the exam. So good essays have a wide variety of examples, and they also, it's pretty obvious talking about America, not just some generic kind of things like they lobby politicians, which could be either side. It links into the American political system itself. Okay, just to highlight, I just did a very quick thing here to highlight there's not just the National Rifle Association. So we can see just from these few pictures here on the top left, the groups here campaigning. It's the ACLU, that's the American Civil Liberties Union, campaigning here for women's right to choose on the top left. On the bottom left, it's come out a bit fuzzy, but it's some kind of climate, well, the People's Climate Movement pressure group. So there's quite a few environmental pressure groups. Obviously, in the news a lot this summer, on the right-hand side at the bottom here, we've got Black Lives Matter. We've got some Native American groups in the middle here who, I think they were campaigning against some of the American football teams being named like Red Sox or and things like that. They weren't too happy about that. And then you see the Keystone Pipeline pressure group at the top right. Again, environmentalists campaigning about this. The Keystone Pipeline, basically, it's Canada does lots of oil extraction through fracking and other means, and they want to build a big pipe that goes from Canada all the way through America down to like Louisiana and New Orleans. And there's been lots of protests and stuff around this. Okay, so because pressure groups are involved in so many aspects of US political life, they can appear, therefore, in lots of types of potential essay questions. These are 30 markers. So, for example, because as you know, many questions in the exam seem to like comparing two things. So you might get a question like, are pressure groups better than political parties at performing their functions? Something like that. Or you might get a question like, about the view that the pressure groups are more effective than the Supreme Court at protecting people's rights. And I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. You might get that type of question. So pressure groups can actually fit into quite a few different types of questions. So when we're studying pressure groups, you need to think about how they might relate to other institutions that we've looked at, other types of groups, that type of stuff. And of course, this is also part of the comparative part of Unit 3. So again, you may very well get comparative questions, explain the similarities in the way US and UK pressure groups try to achieve their aims, or explain the similar criticisms pressure groups in the US and UK receive, or something like that. So again, it is part of the comparative part. So again, you need to be aware of that to make sure that you're comparing stuff. And again, in your booklet, I've tried to put some comparison stuff in there for you. Now, pressure groups in the USA go right back to the origins. They are actually protected in the Constitution. I'm sure you've all... Oh, gosh, gone far, too far. Go back one. I'm sure you've all read, or you should have all read, the First Amendment of the US Constitution. And in the First Amendment, it says, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or the press or the right of people to peacefully assemble. This is the crucial bit with pressure groups, peacefully assemble, i.e. people to demonstrate and stuff, and also to petition the government for redress of grievances. Again, this is directly linking to pressure group activity. So individuals, basically what this means is, can go and complain to their congressman or to the government about what they're upset about, but also they can form groups which can also petition the government, explaining what they're unhappy about and what they want to change. So the Constitution itself actually protects pressure group activity, which actually has made regulations of pressure groups quite difficult, which we'll come to at a later time. Now, this guy, I'm sure you all fully recognise him, Alexis de Tocqueville, I think you say his name, French guy. In the 1830s, he had a little trip to the United States, and he wrote, like, I don't know what it was, like a journal or a book or whatever, about his experiences, I think probably the best word, in the United States. And he said, in no country in the world has the principle of association been more successfully used or applied to a greater multitude of objects than America. Principle of association means groups, i.e. pressure groups. So he was saying that back in the 1830s, America has loads and loads of pressure groups, and these pressure groups are really successful, and they all help kind of the American democratic system. So he's a great fan of American pressure groups back in 1835. And I suppose really what these next 2 weeks are about is, was he right? Are pressure groups today beneficial to American democracy, or do they get in the way of American democracy? Do they help people protect their rights, or do they get in the way of that? Are pressure groups as good as the Constitution at protecting rights or not? So it's these sorts of questions that we'll be looking at. So just to summarise, what you need to know are the methods which pressure groups have, how they try to influence politicians, and again, whilst we're doing all this, thinking about, does this mean that pressure groups are being effective, not effective? Are they helping democracy? Are they undermining democracy? What relations do pressure groups have with politicians and institutions? How well do they perform their functions? And do they do a better job than, say, political parties? Or do they do a better job than, I don't know, some of the American institutions at representing people? And do they have too much power? Has American pressure groups actually become quite elitist, and actually just a few groups tend to dominate? And when you do all that, yes, you can mention the NRA, but again, you must mention others. And I don't want to put an exact figure on, if I was doing an essay about pressure groups, I think I need like 5 or 6 different examples splattered through my essay, I would have thought. Okay then, so I hope that's given you a brief glimpse into the pressure group world, and over the next 2 weeks, you should be an expert on them.